The council chamber floated in the silence of space, a massive ring of metal and glass that orbited the dead world of Centauri Prime. Inside its curved walls, representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections, each protected by atmospheric shields tailored to their biology. The avians breathed methane. The aquarians sat submerged in pressurized water tanks. The lithoids rested on heated stone platforms that glowed dull red. Captain Jiho stood behind Ambassador Hyeri in the human section, his military uniform crisp and dark against the bright diplomatic robes she wore. His face showed nothing. No anger, no fear, no concern. He simply watched as High Commander Vril of the Vryn Empire addressed the council from the central platform. Vril was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms in crystalline armor that grew naturally from his exoskeleton. His voice boomed through the translation systems, each word dripping with contempt. The human infestation has spread to 12 systems that rightfully belong to the Vryn Empire. We have documented their aggression, their illegal settlements, their refusal to acknowledge our historical claims. Holographic displays materialized above the council floor, showing human colony ships, mining operations, and agricultural settlements. Vril gestured at them with 2 of his arms. They build their crude structures on worlds we surveyed centuries ago. They extract resources we designated for future use. They ignore our warnings and mock our authority. Counselor Talmik, the avian mediator, ruffled his silver feathers. His translator gave his chirping voice a measured diplomatic tone. High Commander, the Galactic Council recognized human territorial claims in those systems 14 standard years ago. The settlements are legal under Council law. Council law, Vril spat the words like poison. Created by species who fear conflict, who have forgotten what strength means. The Vryn do not hide behind paper agreements. We take what is ours. Hyeri remained perfectly still in her seat. Jiho noticed the slight tension in her shoulders, the only sign she was bothered by the display. Around them, other council members shifted uncomfortably. The aquarians bubbled nervously in their tanks. The lithoids' platforms grew slightly brighter with heat. Vril continued. Humanity will withdraw from all 12 systems within 48 standard hours. They will pay reparations of 10 billion galactic credits. They will formally acknowledge Vryn's supremacy in that sector. He paused, his faceted eyes gleaming. Or we will remove them by force. The chamber erupted in noise. Dozens of species began talking at once. Translation systems, creating a chaotic symphony of objections, questions, and concerns. Talmik raised his wings for silence, but it took nearly a minute for order to return. This is unprecedented, Talmik said. The Council cannot support an ultimatum that violates established territorial law. High Commander, surely negotiation. There is nothing to negotiate, Vril interrupted. Humanity is a minor species from a single world. A death world, yes, but that changes nothing. They number barely 15 billion across all their colonies. The Vryn Empire commands 200 billion citizens and the most powerful fleet in this sector. They will comply, or they will be eliminated. Jiho leaned slightly toward Hyeri and whispered something too quiet for the translation systems to catch. She gave the smallest nod. Talmik looked at Hyeri expectantly. Ambassador, surely Earth wishes to respond to these charges. Hyeri stood gracefully, smoothing her robes. When she spoke, her voice was calm, almost pleasant. Counselor Talmik, the human delegation would like to request a 48. Our recess to consult with our government on Earth. This seems only fair. Given that we have been given 48 hours to comply with the High Commander's demands. Vril laughed, a harsh grating sound. See how they scramble? They will beg for mercy, offer half measures, plead for more time. This is why Deathworlders will never lead in galactic affairs. They survived harsh conditions by hiding in caves and running from predators. They know nothing of true power. Several council members made sounds of agreement. Others remained silent, watching Hyeri carefully. We are not scrambling, Hyeri said, her tone unchanged. We are simply following proper diplomatic protocol. Surely the mighty Vryn Empire can wait 48 hours for a formal response. Talmik spread his wings. The request is reasonable. The Council will reconvene in 48 standard hours to hear Earth's official response. Until then, both parties will refrain from military action. Hi, Commander. Do you agree to these terms? Vril waved one of his hands dismissively. Let them have their time to prepare their surrender. It changes nothing. Then this session is adjourned, Talmik announced. The atmospheric shields flickered as different species began to leave. Hyeri gathered her data tablets while Jiho maintained his position behind her, still watching everything. A few other ambassadors approached with sympathetic words or quiet advice to accept the terms. Hyeri thanked them politely, her diplomatic mask never slipping. As they walked toward the human transport shuttle, Jiho finally spoke in a normal voice. He called us cave dwellers who ran from predators. I noticed, Hyeri said. On Earth, do you know what happened to most of our predators? We ate them, Hyeri replied. Or domesticated them. Or hunted them to extinction. Jiho smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Exactly. They entered the shuttle and sealed the airlock behind them. Once they were alone in the secure cabin, Hyeri activated the encrypted communication system. The holographic image of Fleet Admiral Doyon materialized before them, his gray hair and stern features marking him as a career military officer. Ambassador, Captain, Doyon greeted them. I watched the proceedings. Analysis. They think we're weak, Hyeri said simply. They think our diplomatic approach means we're afraid. They have no idea what they've just done, Jiho added. Doyon nodded slowly. The fleet is ready. All civilian evacuations can begin within 6 hours. Military assets are positioned as planned. Do we have final confirmation on their fleet positions? Hyeri asked. Down to the exact coordinates, Doyon confirmed. Their security is designed to stop species who respect privacy and territorial boundaries. They never imagined anyone would actually penetrate their networks. Hyeri looked at Jiho, then back at Doyon. 48 hours. We'll give them the full 48 hours. Let them think we're discussing surrender terms. And then, Doyon asked. Then we show them what Deathworlders actually do, Hyeri said quietly. We don't run from predators, Admiral. We become the predators. The hologram faded. The shuttle began its journey back to the human diplomatic vessel. Behind them, the council chamber continued its slow orbit around the dead world. Unaware that in 48 hours, the galaxy would learn a lesson it would never forget. Jiho stared out the viewport at the distant stars. They're going to be so surprised. Good, Hyeri said. Surprise is a weapon too. Fleet Admiral Doyon stood alone in the communications center deep beneath the surface of Earth. The room was small, deliberately so. No grand halls, no theatrical stages, just a simple recording studio with military-grade equipment and a single camera pointed at a plain gray wall. Behind him, Lieutenant Minji monitored the broadcast systems, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. All galactic frequencies are ready, Admiral, she reported. Every major news network, every government channel, every public communication system in Council space. When you give the word, they'll all receive it simultaneously. One nodded. He had spent 30 years in Earth's military, rising through ranks during the expansion era when humanity first reached the stars. He had negotiated with pirates, defended colonies from raiders, and trained 3 generations of officers. He had never started a war until today. Begin transmission, he ordered. The camera activated. Across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds and thousands of ships and stations, screens flickered to life. Species who had been watching news reports about the human ultimatum suddenly found their broadcasts interrupted. Emergency override protocols engaged. In living rooms and government offices, in markets and military command centers, beings of every description stopped what they were doing to watch. Doyon looked directly into the camera. When he spoke, his voice was calm, measured, and absolutely certain. This is Fleet Admiral Doyon of the United Earth Defense Force. At 1400 hours Galactic Standard Time, High Commander Vril of the Vrin Empire issued an ultimatum to humanity. He demanded we abandon our legal settlements, pay fictional reparations, and accept Vrin authority over sovereign human territory. He threatened to remove us by force if we refused. He paused, letting the words settle. Across the galaxy, billions of beings leaned closer to their screens. Earth's response is as follows. We refuse all demands. Furthermore, as of this moment, a state of war exists between humanity and the Varin Empire. This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. This is a statement of fact. On the Varin command ship, Eternal Dominance, High Commander Vril laughed so hard his crystalline armor rattled. Around him, his officers joined in the mockery. One of them, Junior Officer G1, felt a small, uncomfortable tightness in her thorax but said nothing. Doyun continued speaking. The following Vrin military assets have been designated as hostile targets. The screen behind him, filled with data, coordinates, fleet positions, ship classifications, supply depot locations, command center layouts. 37 Varin battle groups, currently positioned in the following systems. The coordinates appeared in precise detail. Vril's laughter died. He stared at the screen, his compound eyes widening. Those were classified positions, deep military secrets protected by the Empire's best security systems. Vrin High Command operates from 3 locations, Doyen said. More data appeared. Exact building specifications. Underground bunker layouts. Defense grid patterns. These facilities are now considered legitimate military targets. Possible, Vril whispered. How do the Varin Empire maintains weapons development facilities at the following locations? Another cascade of information. Research stations humanity should have had no way of knowing existed. These facilities will be neutralized, aboard a civilian transport leaving one of the human colonies. Scientist Sun Ho sat with his wife and daughter, watching the broadcast on a small screen. His daughter, only 6 years old, tugged his sleeve. Papa, why do we have to leave our home? Because there's going to be fighting, sweetheart, he said softly. Bad people want to hurt us, so the soldiers need to protect us. Will the soldiers win? Sun Ho looked at the data streaming across the screen, at the impossible depth of intelligence humanity had gathered. Yes, he said. They will win. His wife gripped his hand tightly. She worked in agricultural genetics, not military intelligence, but she understood what she was seeing. How long have we been preparing for this? Since the day we met the Vrin, Sun Ho replied. We just didn't tell anyone. Back on Earth, Doyen's broadcast continued. All Varin military personnel are hereby notified that continued hostile action will result in the complete destruction of your war-making capability. Surrender will be accepted only under the following terms. The terms appeared. They were harsh, unconditional, absolute. Civilian Viren populations will not be targeted. Medical facilities, schools, and non-military infrastructure will be spared where possible. We are not monsters. But make no mistake, the Varin military will be dismantled. Lieutenant Minji glanced at her screens, monitoring reaction across the galaxy. Every major news network was in chaos. Council members were frantically trying to contact each other. Stock markets were crashing. Civilian ships were changing course, fleeing potential battle zones. Admiral, she said quietly, the Council is trying to reach us. 37 different species requesting emergency talks. Ignore them, Doyen said. This message is for the Vrin, not the Council. He turned back to the camera. High Commander Vril made a critical error in his assumptions. He believed that, because we came from a harsh world, we must be weak. He believed that because we chose diplomacy, we were incapable of war. He believed that because we are relatively young in galactic terms, we were naive. Ian's expression hardened. Humanity survived ice ages and plagues. We survived predators that hunted us and disasters that nearly destroyed us. We didn't survive by being weak. We survived by being smarter, more adaptable, and more ruthless than everything that tried to kill us. We chose diplomacy because war is wasteful and destructive, but we never forgot how to fight. On the council station, Talmik watched the broadcast with growing horror. His feathers lay flat against his body, a sign of extreme distress. Around him, other counselors were panicking, demanding explanations, calling for emergency sessions. They can't do this. One of the Aquarian representatives bubbled frantically. They can't just declare war without council approval. They just did, Talmik said quietly. On the Eternal Dominance, Junior Officer G1 pulled up tactical displays with trembling arms. Hi, Commander. The human data is accurate. Those are our actual fleet positions, updated within the last 6 hours. They have real-time intelligence on our movements. Vril said nothing. He stared at the screen where Doyen's face looked out at the galaxy with calm certainty. Hostilities will commence in 46 hours and 12 minutes, Doyen said. This gives Vryn civilians time to evacuate areas near military installations. It gives Vryn military personnel time to consider surrender. It gives the galaxy time to clear neutral zones of civilian traffic. He leaned slightly closer to the camera. But make no mistake, in 46 hours and 12 minutes, the United Earth Defense Force will begin combat operations. We will not stop until the Vryn military surrenders unconditionally or ceases to exist. We did not want this war. The Vryn forced it upon us. Screen went black. For a moment, there was only silence across the galaxy. Then the chaos truly began. News networks exploded with analysis. Military experts tried to explain what they had just witnessed. Governments called emergency meetings. The Galactic Council attempted to organize mediation that neither side would accept. On Earth, Doyen turned away from the camera. How long until our people are clear? 43 hours, Lieutenant Minji reported. We built in margin for error. Good. Doyen walked toward the door, then paused. Mingy, do you think we're doing the right thing? She looked up from her screens. Sir, they threatened to kill 15 billion humans because they wanted our homes. Yes, we're doing the right thing. Doyen nodded and left the room. Behind him, Minji continued monitoring the galaxy's reaction, watching as the reality settled in. Humanity had not begged, had not negotiated, had not shown weakness. Humanity had declared war with the same calm professionalism they brought to everything else. And somehow, that was more terrifying than any threat could have been. On the Eternal Dominance, Vril finally found his voice. Prepare the fleet for immediate deployment. We'll crush these Deathworld primitives before they even stir, his tactical officer interrupted. Our sensors are detecting massive human fleet movements. They're not positioning defensively. They're moving toward our staging areas. Vril felt cold certainty settle into his thorax. They wouldn't dare strike first. High Commander Giwan said softly, reading her screens. Human civilian vessels are evacuating all outer colonies. Not fleeing randomly. They're clearing specific zones, creating empty space around our military targets. So, Vril demanded. So they're clearing blast zones, sir? They're preparing to attack, and they don't want their own civilians caught in the crossfire. The command deck fell silent. Somewhere in that silence, the Vryn Empire began to understand that they had not cornered a weak species. They had awakened something far more dangerous. The first strike came. Exactly 46 hours and 12 minutes. After Admiral Doyen's broadcast, not a minute early, not a second late. The precision itself was unsettling. Major Hannah stood in the drop bay of the assault carrier Bassan's Pride, watching her Marines perform final equipment checks. Each soldier wore powered armor designed for extended combat operations. But it was what they carried alongside their weapons that made this deployment unique. Handlers. Sound off, Hannah ordered. K-29 unit ready, ma'am, reported one Marine. Beside him sat 3 German shepherds, their intelligent eyes watching everything. Each dog wore a tactical harness with cameras and communication equipment. Raptor unit ready. Another Marine gestured to the reinforced cages holding 6 Harris Hawks. Genetically enhanced for size and aggression, their talons could punch through light armor. Biowarfare package secured, called the science officer, Dr. Yuna, checking her sealed containers. Inside them, cultures of Earth bacteria waited, modified to thrive in ship environments and break down Vryn life support systems. Across the galaxy, 3 Vryn staging areas prepared for what they assumed would be a conventional attack. Their shields powered up. Their weapons locked onto incoming human ships. Their commanders felt confident. The Vryn had been fighting wars for 1,000 years. These upstart Deathworlders would learn their place. Then the human fleet arrived. And nothing went as expected. Pilot Kuhn dove his fighter through the upper atmosphere of Vryn, staging base Theta, pulling maneuvers that made his wingmates nervous. The base was built on a moon with minimal atmosphere, just enough to create weather patterns. The Vryn defenders assumed no sane pilot would use atmospheric tactics in such conditions. Kuhn wasn't insane. He was from Earth, where pilots trained in every condition from sea level to the edge of space. He used the thin atmosphere like a weapon, creating shockwaves that disrupted Vryn sensors. Diving through storm formations that would tear apart ships designed for vacuum-only combat. "This is impossible," the Vryn flight coordinator transmitted. "No one can fly like that." "Welcome to Deathworld Aviation," Kyung replied. Before putting 3 missiles through the base's shield generator, on the ground assault at staging base Gamma, Major Hana's forces hit the outer defenses with overwhelming firepower. The Vryn troops, expecting standard tactics, found themselves fighting an enemy that made no sense. The dogs went in first. Small enough to slip through defensive positions, fast enough to avoid most fire. They didn't attack directly. They terrified. Vryn soldiers, evolved on a world with no packed predators, had no instinct for dealing with coordinated hunting groups. The dogs drove them from cover, disrupted formations, created chaos. Then the hawk struck from above, peering from nowhere to slash its sensors and communication equipment with enhanced talons. Vryn troops tried to shoot them down, but the birds moved with the kind of 3-dimensional combat awareness that came from millions of years of evolution. Hunting prey in Earth's skies, Junior Officer Juan, reassigned to ground defense after the Eternal Dominance withdrew from the front lines, watched in horror as her unit's defensive line collapsed. Not because they lacked courage or firepower, but because they were fighting an enemy that brought its entire planet's evolutionary history to war. "They have animals," she transmitted back to command. "Actual animals. Beasts that hunt in packs, that coordinate, that seem to understand tactical objectives. How is this possible?" The answer came from Dr. Yuna as she deployed her bacterial packages into the base's ventilation system. "You think Deathworlders survive alone?" she said to no one in particular, working methodically. "Everything on Earth had to evolve to kill or be killed. We didn't just survive our world. We domesticated it. We turned predators into allies. We weaponized our entire ecosystem." The bacteria spread through staging base Gamma's air systems. Aggressive Earth microorganisms that found Vryn technology to be an ideal food source. Seals began to fail. Air recyclers clogged. The base didn't explode or burn. It simply stopped working, piece by piece. As Earth's microscopic life consumed it, on the Council Station, Talmik watched live feeds from all 3 battle sites. His wings trembled. Around him, other council members sat in stunned silence. "They're not just attacking," one of the lithoid representatives said, its voice resonating through its stone body. "They're demonstrating. This is a message." "What message?" demanded an Aquarian counselor. "That they've been holding back," Talmik replied quietly. "All this time, in all our interactions, they've been showing us only what they wanted us to see. They made us think they were like U.S. civilized species who left their brutal origins behind. But they never left anything behind. They brought it all with them." At staging base Alpha, the battle took a different form. Here, the Vryn had prepared better defenses, underground bunkers designed to withstand orbital bombardment. Captain Ji-ho, commanding the assault from his ship Soul's Fury, studied the situation. "They think being underground makes them safe," he said to his tactical officer. "On Earth, we've been fighting underground for millions of years. In caves, in tunnels, in subway systems, during the last World War." He ordered a deployment of specialized units trained in subterranean combat. These soldiers wore lighter armor, carried different weapons, and moved through the underground complexes with a confidence that came from species memory. Humans had hidden from predators in caves once. Then humans had become the thing that hunted in darkness. The Vryn troops. fighting in tunnels for the first time in their military history, found themselves at every disadvantage. Humans could see better in low light, adapted to darkness by evolution. They could navigate tight spaces with ease, their smaller frames an advantage instead of a weakness. They used sound and vibration to track enemies through solid rock, senses honed by ancestors who had survived by being better hunters than anything that hunted them. Within 6 hours, all 3 staging bases were neutralized. Not destroyed, neutralized. The Vryn military forces were captured or eliminated. The infrastructure remained mostly intact. Civilian areas were untouched. High Commander Viril watched the reports come in from his command. Bunker on the Vryn homeworld. 3 bases. 3 decisive defeats. Human casualties, minimal. Vryn casualties, catastrophic. How? He demanded. How are they doing this? We have superior numbers, superior technology, superior evolution, sir, interrupted his intelligence officer, a rare moment of insubordination. They come from a world that tried to kill them every single day. We come from a world where the greatest danger was weather patterns. They evolved to hunt. We evolved to cooperate with herd groups. In war, which trait wins? Viril had no answer. Back on Earth, Fleet Admiral Doyen reviewed the battle reports with grim satisfaction. Everything had gone according to plan. Better than planned, actually. The preliminary estimates had projected higher casualties. The Council is demanding we cease hostilities immediately, Lieutenant Minji reported. 17 different species are calling for emergency mediation. Tell them we'll cease hostilities when the Vryn military surrenders unconditionally, Doyen replied. Not before? Sir, some council members are suggesting that our tactics are inappropriate. Using animals. Biological weapons, what they're calling savage methods? Doyen looked up sharply. Savage. We gave them warning. We evacuated civilians. We're accepting surrenders and treating prisoners according to galactic conventions. The Vryn threatened to exterminate our colonies without any warning at all, and we're the savages. I'm just reporting what they're saying, sir. Doyen stood, walking to the window of his office. Outside, Earth rotated peacefully below the orbital command station. Blue oceans. Green countenance. White clouds. A beautiful death world that had tried to kill humanity for millions of years and failed. Tell the Council this, he said quietly. We are Deathworlders. We make no apology for that. We use every advantage our evolution gave us. We work with our animals because we learned long ago that cooperation beats isolation. We deploy biological systems because we understand life in ways species from gentle worlds never had to learn. This isn't savage. This is survival. This is what happens when you threaten a species that earned its place at the top of the most dangerous planet in known space. Lieutenant Minji transmitted the message. Across the galaxy, the council members who received it felt a chill that their climate-controlled, environments couldn't explain. On the ground at Staging Base Gamma, Major Hannah walked through the captured facility with one of her dogs at her side. The animal, a shepherd named Max, had performed perfectly in combat. Now he sat calmly beside her, waiting for the next command. A captured Vryn officer, bedazzled, wounded but alive, watched them approach. Your beast, he said through his translator. It kills on command. Max isn't a beast, Hannah replied. He's a soldier. He's my partner. His ancestors helped my ancestors hunt mammoths 10,000 years ago. Yes, he kills on command. He also saves lives on command, finds wounded soldiers, and keeps watch while we sleep. That's what Deathworld evolution creates, not just killers, but partners who trust each other absolutely. The Vryn officer said nothing, but his eyes reflected a new understanding. These humans hadn't just survived their harsh world, they had mastered it completely. 3 weeks into the war, the galactic community expected stalemate. They expected negotiations, compromises, the usual patterns of civilized conflict. Instead, they watched the Vryn Empire collapse. High Commander Vril stood in his command bunker, 4 levels beneath the surface of the Vryn homeworld, and stared at tactical displays that showed nothing but red. red icons for lost ships, red zones for captured territory, red alerts from commanders begging for reinforcements he didn't have. "Our fourth fleet is gone," his operations officer reported, voice hollow. "The humans hit them at the refueling station near Kelmore 3. Our ships were docked. Crews were on leave rotation. The humans waited until that exact moment. They're monitoring our operations in real time," the intelligence officer added. "Every communication we send, they intercept. Every fleet movement we make, they track. Sir, it's like they're inside our networks, watching everything." Vril's crystalline armor had dulled, losing its shine. "How is this possible? We have the best encryption in the galaxy. We have encryption designed to stop species who respect privacy laws," the intelligence officer said carefully. "The humans apparently started hacking our systems the moment we met them, years ago. They've been inside our networks the entire time, building maps of everything. We weren't fighting them for 3 weeks. They've been fighting us for years. We just didn't know it." On the human carrier Soul's Fury, Captain Jiho reviewed the same intelligence data his counterparts were seeing. Every Vrin ship position, every supply cache, every commander's personal communication logs. The Vrin had built their security systems to stop polite species who asked permission. Humanity had never asked permission. They had simply taken what they needed. "Admiral Doyan is asking if you're ready for the boarding operation," his tactical officer reported. Jiho nodded. "Tell Sergeant Minho his team is authorized to proceed." Sergeant Minho and his squad wore heavy combat armor as they approached the Vrin. Flagship Eternal Victory and small assault pods. The massive dreadnought tried to defend itself, but human electronic warfare had already compromised most of its systems. Turrets fired at empty space. Shields flickered randomly. The great ship had been reduced to a nearly defenseless hulk. The pods attached to the hull with magnetic clamps. Cutting torches burned through armor. Within minutes, Minho's squad was inside, moving through corridors designed for beings much larger than humans. "Advantage us," Minho said over squad communications. "Smaller targets, better maneuverability in tight spaces." These corridors were built for four-armed giants, not infantry combat. They encountered the first Vrin defense force at a major intersection. The Vrin soldiers opened fire immediately, plasma bolts scorching the walls. But human armor was designed by a species that had studied every form of combat in their brutal history. The Vrin aimed where large targets would be. Humans went low, using their size as camouflage, returning fire with precision. Close-quarters combat was brief and brutal. The Vrin had strength and reach. Humans had speed, and thousands of years of experience fighting things bigger than themselves. Minho's squad moved like water, flowing around obstacles, supporting each other with unconscious coordination that came from endless training. Within an hour, they had captured the bridge. The Vrin command staff surrendered without firing a shot, staring at the armored humans who had somehow taken their most powerful ship. "Tell High Commander Vril we have his flagship," Minho reported. "No casualties on our side. Vrin crew will be treated as prisoners of war per galactic conventions." Back on Earth, Ambassador Hyeri sat in emergency session with the Galactic Council. The meeting was tense. Counselor Telmic had requested it personally, and for once, every species was present. Ambassador Harry Talmic began, his feathers smooth, but his voice strained. "The Council appreciates that you agreed to attend. We wish to offer mediation services to end this conflict. The war ends when the Vrin military surrenders unconditionally," Hyeri replied calmly. "We stated this clearly. But the Vrin are willing to negotiate now." An Aquarian representative bubbled. "High Commander Vril has authorized us to discuss terms. Surely Earth can show mercy." "We have shown mercy," Hyeri said. "Vrin civilian casualties are minimal. We've actively evacuated non-combatants from battle zones. We've accepted every surrender offered to us directly. We've treated prisoners according to galactic law. The Vrin military, however, continues to fight, so we continue to dismantle it." "This is madness," shouted a Lithoid counselor. "You're destroying an entire empire." "No," Hyeri corrected. "We're destroying a military force that threatened genocide against human colonies. There's a difference. Vryn civilians are safe. Vryn culture is intact. Vryn worlds remain under their own governance. We're simply removing their ability to threaten anyone ever again. Talmik leaned forward. And what happens when you win? What then? Will Earth become the new dominant military power, enforcing its will on the galaxy? Hyeri met his gaze steadily. Is that what you would do in our position? That's not. Talmik's feathers ruffled in agitation. We don't want dominance, Hyeri said. We never did. We wanted to be left alone to develop our colonies and trade peacefully. The Vryn decided that wasn't acceptable. They thought threatening us would make us submit. They were wrong. She stood, her diplomatic robes flowing around her. The Council has a choice to make. You can continue trying to save the Vryn military from the consequences of their own aggression. Or you can start thinking about what happens after this war. When Earth has proven that Deathworlders aren't weak just because we prefer peace, is that a threat? Demanded the Lithoid. No, Hyeri said. It's an observation. The old order assumed that species from gentle worlds were superior because they developed advanced technology peacefully. You looked at Earth and saw primitive violence. You looked at the Vryn and saw military strength. You built a system where might made right, as long as that might was controlled by civilized hands. She paused at the door. We're showing you what happens when someone actually threatens a species that evolved to fight. Not because we enjoy fighting. Because we're very, very good at it when we have to be. The galaxy needs to decide if it wants a system based on power or a system based on law. Because if it's based on power, Earth just became very relevant to that conversation. The council chamber fell silent as she left. On the Vryn homeworld, High Commander Vril made one final desperate gamble. He ordered civilian populations move to surround military installations, using them as shields. The humans claim to care about non-combatants, he told his remaining officers. Let's test that claim. The human response was swift and unexpected. Instead of attacking through civilian areas, human special forces evacuated the civilians first. They came in medical ships, humanitarian vessels, even commandeered civilian transports. They landed in population centers, announced they were evacuating everyone to safety, and calmly processed millions of Vryn refugees while their military forces waited. Refugee Coordinator Salman worked 18-hour days processing Vryn families, providing medical care, distributing food and supplies. Why are you doing this? One Vryn civilian asked her, confusion evident even through the translator. We're your enemies. No, Salman replied gently. Your military leaders are our enemies. You're just people trying to survive. We know what that's like. Once the civilians were clear, human forces eliminated the now unshielded military installations with surgical precision. Vril's gambit had failed completely. Junior Officer Jiwan, now promoted to acting commander after most of her superiors died or surrendered, sat in a damaged command post and watched the end approaching. Her screen showed human forces advancing on all fronts. Not rushing, not desperate, just advancing with methodical certainty. They're not even angry, she said to her remaining staff. That's what makes it terrifying. They're not doing this out of rage or revenge. They're doing it because we made it necessary. It's just business to them. Terrible, efficient business. Her communications officer received a transmission. Ma'am, the High Commander is trying to surrender to the Galactic Council. He's asking them to guarantee his safety, and the humans. They've refused to recognize any surrender except direct submission to Earth forces. Guan stood slowly. Open a channel to the nearest human commander. Ma'am, do it. This is pointless. We lost this war the moment we started it. We just didn't know it yet. She surrendered her forces directly to Captain Jiho, becoming one of hundreds of Vryn officers who made the same choice in the final days of the war. Not because they were cowards, but because they finally understood what they were fighting. High Commander Vril, abandoned by his subordinates and hunted by human special forces, was captured trying to flee the homeworld in a civilian transport. He was turned over to Earth forces without ceremony. The war was over. The Galactic Council reconvened. But this time, everyone understood that the galaxy had changed. The old assumptions were dead. The old hierarchies were broken, and humanity, patient and thorough, waited to see what would come next. The reconstructed council chamber looked the same as before, but everything had changed. The same curved walls, the same atmospheric shields, the same seating arrangements. But when Ambassador Hyeri walked to the human section, every eye in the room followed her. When Fleet Admiral Doyon entered behind her, silent and imposing in his dress uniform, several counselors shifted nervously. Counselor Talmik called the session to order, his feathers meticulously groomed, but his voice uncertain. The Galactic Council recognizes this emergency session to address the recent conflict between Earth and the Vryn Empire, which has concluded with Vryn military surrender. Surrender? Hyeri asked mildly. Let's be precise. The Vryn Empire surrendered unconditionally to Earth forces, not to the Council. To Earth, the distinction made several counselors uncomfortable. An Aquarian representative bubbled nervously. Surely the Council should oversee the terms. No, Hyeri interrupted, her tone pleasant but absolute. The Council had its chance to prevent this war. You chose to allow the Vryn to issue ultimatums to a sovereign species. You chose to treat their threats as legitimate negotiating tactics. You chose to view us as too minor, too young, too weak to matter. Those choices have consequences. Talmik ruffled his feathers. Ambassador, the Council system has maintained peace for over 2,000 years. We cannot simply. Your system maintained peace among species who agreed to follow your rules, Hyeri said. What happened when someone broke those rules and threatened genocide? You offered mediation. You suggested compromise? You acted as though our survival was negotiable. She looked around the chamber. So yes, we handled it ourselves. And now what? Demanded the Lithoid counselor. Earth has the most powerful military in council space. You've demonstrated abilities we didn't know existed. You've dismantled an empire in less than a month. What are your intentions? Before Hyeri could answer, Doyon stepped forward. He had remained silent until now, a watchful presence. When he spoke, his voice carried weight. Before we discuss intentions, the Council needs to see something. He activated a holographic display. Data streamed into the chamber, filling the space with damning evidence. Communication intercepts. Military planning documents. Strategic assessments. All from Vryn sources. This is what our intelligence services discovered during the war, Doyon said. The Vryn didn't just plan to attack humanity. After securing our territory, they intended to move against 6 other species. He highlighted the targets: the Delphian Collective, the Tarvosian Union, the Kresh Domains, the Minari Federation, the Parthian Worlds, and the Velen Assembly. The named species reacted with shock. Their representatives stood, demanding explanations, accessing the data themselves. The evidence was thorough. Invasion timetables, resource allocation plans, projections of casualties and conquest timelines. The Vryn viewed the Council system as a shield they could hide behind while preparing for expansion, Doyon continued. They followed just enough rules to avoid sanctions, while building military infrastructure aimed at multiple targets. Humanity happened to be first on their list, but we wouldn't have been the last. A representative from the Delphian Collective, a crystalline being that communicated through light pulses, addressed the chamber. If this data is accurate, the Vryn would have attacked us within 3 standard years. Earth saved us. Earth saved itself, Hyeri corrected. But yes, dismantling the Vryn military prevented these other conflicts. Not because we're noble saviors, because we were thorough. Talmik examined the data, his expert eyes picking through details. This intelligence network you built, it penetrated Vryn systems completely. Does it extend to other species as well? The chamber fell silent. Every counselor suddenly wondered the same thing. What did Earth know about their governments? Their military capabilities? Their secrets? Hyeri smiled slightly. What do you think? I think, Talmik said slowly, that we have severely underestimated Earth since first contact. And I think that was intentional on your part. Of course it was. Hyeri agreed. We came from a death world. We were young, technologically behind in many areas, small in population. Every species we met assumed we were primitive. So we let you assume it. While you saw us as simple newcomers, we studied you. We learned your languages, your cultures, your systems. We understood that information was our greatest weapon long before we built our first warship. She walked to the center of the chamber, addressing all of them. The council system has a fundamental flaw. It assumes all species share similar values, similar approaches to conflict, similar restraint. But what happens when a species doesn't share those values? What happens when someone decides the rules don't apply to them? The council has enforcement mechanisms, the Aquarian protested weakly, which take years to implement and require consensus among species who can't agree on basic issues, Hyeri countered. The Vryn knew this. They exploited it. And they would have continued exploiting it while conquering everyone too weak to resist alone. Doyon picked up the thread. Earth proposes a new framework, one based on actual equality, not the fiction of it. One where military power is transparent and collective, not hoarded by empires who pretend to follow the rules. Holographic documents appeared, distributed to every counselor's station. The proposal was detailed, comprehensive, and radical. Collective security, Hyeri explained. Any attack on one signatory is treated as an attack on all. Mandatory intelligence sharing on military buildups. Joint peacekeeping forces drawn from multiple species. And most importantly, real consequences for aggression. Not just diplomatic hand-wringing. This would require species to give up sovereignty over military decisions, the Lithoid objected. No, Hyeri said. It requires species to be honest about military decisions. You can build whatever forces you want, as long as you're transparent about it. The Vryn built their war machine in secret while pretending to be peaceful. That's what we're preventing, and who enforces this system? Talmuk asked, though he already knew the answer. Initially. Earth, Doyon said bluntly. We have the capability, the intelligence networks, and the proven willingness to act. Eventually, a combined force drawn from all signatories. We're offering to train any species that wants to contribute. Share our methods, our technology, our experience. You're asking us to learn Deathworld tactics. An Aquarian counselor bubbled with distaste. We're offering to teach you how to survive, Hyeri corrected. You don't have to fight like us. But you should understand how fighting actually works, instead of pretending that polite words prevent violence. Captain Jiho, who had been standing silently by the door, spoke for the first time. The council kept peace among species who wanted peace. That's admirable. But you had no answer for species who wanted war. Earth is offering to be that answer, with any allies who choose to join us. The debate lasted hours. Species caucused, argued, analyzed the proposal from every angle. Some rejected it immediately. Others saw the logic but feared the change. Still others recognized that Earth had just demonstrated both the power to destroy them and the restraint not to, which was its own form of message. In the end, 23 species signed the new charter. Not a majority of the council, but enough. The Delphian collective signed first, grateful for the threat they'd unknowingly avoided. Others followed, calculating that cooperation with Earth was safer than opposition. The species that refused to sign were noted. Not threatened, not punished, just noted. They understood the implication. The trial of High Commander Viril became a public spectacle. He was prosecuted under galactic law for crimes against sapient beings. With evidence provided by both Earth and the Vryn, provisional government that had emerged after his capture, when asked to speak in his defense, Viril stood in his containment field and addressed the court. I made one mistake, he said, his voice bitter. I believed the propaganda. I believed Deathworlders were primitive because their world was harsh. I believed species that chose peace were weak. He looked directly at the human observers. I was wrong. They aren't weak. They're patient. They're strategic. And they're absolutely ruthless when necessary. I threatened them expecting submission. I should have expected exactly what happened. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on a neutral world, serving as a permanent reminder of what happened when empires forgot that peace was a choice, not a weakness. Engineer Subin led the reconstruction efforts on Vryn worlds damaged in the war. Her teams worked alongside Vryn engineers, rebuilding infrastructure, repairing systems, helping restore normalcy. Junior Officer G1, now working for the provisional government, watched humans work with former enemies and felt cognitive dissonance. "You're helping us," she said to Subin during an inspection tour. "After everything we did, you're rebuilding our worlds." "Of course," Subin replied. "The war was with your military leadership, not your civilization. Besides, stable Vryn worlds means stable neighbors. That's better for everyone. On my world, the victor dominates the defeated. That's natural law." "Your world didn't have pack predators that learned cooperation," Subin said. "On Earth, we learned that sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to turn them into an ally. We're very good at domestication. Remember?" Giwan wasn't sure if that was reassuring or terrifying. 6 months after the war ended, Hayeri walked through a memorial garden on Earth with Fleet Admiral Doyon. The garden honored both human and Vryn casualties, names carved into black stone under open sky. "The Council still doesn't trust us," Doyen observed. "They shouldn't," Hayeri replied. "We're dangerous. We proved that thoroughly, yet we're trying to build something better, because we understand that being dangerous doesn't mean being cruel. Earth survived by being adaptable, by learning, by improving. We applied those lessons to war. Now we're applying them to peace." Doyon stopped at a section listing Vryn names. "Do you think it will work? The new system?" "I think species will always test boundaries," Hayeri said. "But now they know what happens when they test ours. That's not a perfect deterrent, but it's better than what we had. Some counselors are calling us the new empire. They think we'll become what we destroyed." Hayeri turned to face him. "Will we?" Doyon considered the question seriously. "We could. We have the power. The infrastructure, the intelligence networks. We could absolutely dominate the galaxy if we wanted to. But that's not survival. That's control. And control requires constant force, constant vigilance, constant oppression. Earth didn't survive millions of years by controlling everything around us. We survived by adapting to what we couldn't control and changing what we could. An empire would make us rigid. We'd stop adapting. And then something else would come along and we'd fall, just like every empire before us." Hayeri nodded slowly. "So we stay flexible. We stay watchful. We help those who want help, defend those who need defending, and make it very clear what happens to those who threaten us. Speak softly and carry a big stick." Doyen quoted an ancient human saying. "Exactly. Though I think we've proven our stick is adequately large." They walked in silence for a while, past names of soldiers and civilians, human and Vryn. All those who died because one empire forgot that choosing peace didn't mean being weak in orbit above Earth. A new training facility opened, welcoming officers from 23 different species. They would learn human tactics, human strategy, human approaches to conflict. Some would embrace it. Others would adapt it to their own needs. All would gain new understanding of what Deathworld evolution created. On the Vryn homeworld, the provisional government formally applied for membership in the new collective security framework. Their military would be rebuilt, but under transparent guidelines, with mutual oversight. Former enemies becoming partners, not through conquest, but through demonstrated strength and offered cooperation across the galaxy. Species whispered about Earth, the death world that sent diplomats who smiled while gathering intelligence, the military that fought with animals and bacteria, the humans who could destroy empires but chose to rebuild them instead. Some species saw opportunity in alliance. Others saw threat in opposition. All saw a truth they had missed before, that surviving a harsh world didn't make a species primitive, it made them survivors. And survivors, when threatened, became the most dangerous force in the galaxy, not because they loved violence, but because they understood it completely, and chose peace anyway until peace was no longer possible. Then they chose victory. Absolute, total, undeniable victory. And then, remarkably, they chose mercy. That was what made them truly terrifying. any species could destroy. Only Deathworlders seem to understand that the real power came from knowing when not to.